It was one of those nights where you're just too tired to cook, you know? I had been at work all day, dealing with one problem after another, and by the time I was done, I just wanted something quick and easy to eat. So I decided to hit up the McDonald's near my apartment. It's usually a pretty busy spot, but that night it was strangely quiet. When I pulled into the parking lot, there were only a couple of cars there, which was unusual. It was around 9 p.m., and normally this place would still be buzzing with people. But that night, it felt like I was walking into some sort of weird alternate reality where everyone else had something better to do. I didn't think much of it at the time, just figured maybe it was a slow night. I went inside and ordered my usual, a Big Mac meal with a Coke. The girl behind the counter seemed kind of distracted, like she wasn't really there. She didn't even make eye contact with me, just kept glancing toward the back of the restaurant every few seconds. It was kind of unsettling, but I just brushed it off, figuring she was probably just tired like everyone else. As I waited for my food, I noticed something odd. There was this guy sitting at a table in the corner, just staring at his food. Not eating, not looking at his phone, just staring at his burger like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. I thought maybe he was just zoning out, like people do sometimes. But then I realized he wasn't blinking. He was just staring, completely motionless. It gave me this weird feeling, like I was watching something I wasn't supposed to. Anyway, I got my food and sat down at a table near the window. I like to sit near the window when I eat. It gives me something to look at while I scroll through my phone. I tried to ignore the weird vibe in the place and just focus on my food, but I couldn't shake that feeling, like something was off. I glanced up a few times, and each time that guy was still there, still staring at his food. It was starting to creep me out. I mean, who does that? And it wasn't just him. There were a couple of other people in there too, but they were acting strange as well. One guy was sitting a few tables away, just staring out the window, not looking at anything in particular, just staring blankly. Another person was sitting with their back to me, but they were hunched over in this weird way, like they were hiding their face. I was starting to get really uneasy. It felt like I'd walked into some kind of twilight zone where everyone was just off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe they were just having a bad day or something. But then something happened that made my skin crawl. The guy who had been staring at his food finally moved. He reached out, picked up his burger, and took a bite. But the way he did it was so mechanical, so robotic, like he was being controlled or something. He didn't even chew, just held the bite in his mouth, still staring straight ahead. Then he slowly put the burger back down and just sat there, not moving again. I was officially freaked out at this point. I kept my eyes on my phone, trying to act like I wasn't noticing this bizarre scene unfolding around me. I just wanted to finish my food and get the hell out of there. But then I heard a noise that made my blood run cold. It was this low, humming sound, coming from somewhere in the back of the restaurant. It was barely audible at first, but it started to get louder, like some kind of machinery was turning on. I looked around, trying to see if anyone else was hearing it, but nobody seemed to react. The girl behind the counter was gone, and the rest of the people were still in their weird trances. The humming got louder and louder, and it felt like it was vibrating through the floor, through the tables, through me. I started to feel lightheaded, like the room was spinning. I had this sudden, overwhelming urge to leave, to get out of there before something bad happened. I grabbed my stuff and stood up, trying to keep my cool. But as I turned to head for the door, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The guy who had been staring at his food was now staring at me. His eyes were locked on me, unblinking, his head tilted slightly to the side. It was like he was studying me, analyzing me, and it felt like he was looking right through me. I quickened my pace, almost running to the door. I pushed it open and practically sprinted to my car. As I got in and locked the doors, I glanced back at the entrance. The guy was standing there now, just inside the door, still staring at me. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I could feel his eyes on me, like two dark holes burning into my soul. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking, and finally managed to start the car. I pulled out of the parking lot as fast as I could, and didn't stop driving until I was miles away. I pulled over into another parking lot, my heart racing, and just sat there for a while, trying to process what had just happened. I kept telling myself it was just a weird night, that I was overreacting, but no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just narrowly avoided something really bad. I don't know what it was, but something in that McDonald's wasn't right. Maybe it was just a bunch of weird people having a weird night, but it felt like more than that. It felt like I'd walked into a place I wasn't supposed to be, like I had seen something I wasn't supposed to see. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that guy's face, staring at me with those empty, unblinking eyes. I started avoiding that McDonald's, and even now, I get this uneasy feeling whenever I drive by it. I never found out what that humming sound was, or why everyone in there was acting so strange. Part of me doesn't want to know. I've tried to forget about it, to chalk it up to just a weird, creepy night, but it's hard to let go of that feeling. That feeling that something was really, really wrong in there. I guess the lesson here is to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. I mean, it's just McDonald's, right? A place where you go for a quick meal, not for some horror movie experience. But that night, it felt like I had stepped into a different world, one where nothing made sense and everything was just wrong. I still eat at McDonald's sometimes, but I'm always on edge, always looking around, checking to see if anyone is acting weird. I know it sounds paranoid, but after that night, I'd rather be safe than sorry. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed longer, and I don't want to find out. So that's my story. A simple trip to McDonald's that turned into one of the most unsettling experiences of my life. I don't know if it was all in my head or if something was actually happening in there, but it's a night I'll never forget. And now, every time I walk into a McDonald's, I can't help but feel a little bit of that fear creeping back in, reminding me that sometimes the scariest things are the ones that happen when you least expect them. Alright, let me tell you about this weird experience I had at McDonald's a while back. It still gives me chills when I think about it, and I'm not the type to get scared easily. This all happened a few months ago, on a Friday night. I had a long day at work and didn't feel like cooking, so I decided to grab some McDonald's on my way home. You know how it is when you just crave something greasy and comforting. So I took a detour and headed to the 24-hour McDonald's near my place. It was around 11 p.m. when I got there, and the parking lot was almost empty. Usually this place is buzzing even late at night, but that night it was eerily quiet. I remember thinking it was strange, but didn't dwell on it too much. I figured maybe it was just an off night. I parked my car and walked inside, already thinking about that Big Mac I was going to order. The moment I stepped in, I felt this strange vibe. You know when something just feels off? The air was heavy, and the fluorescent lights were flickering, casting weird shadows around the place. There were only a couple of people inside, scattered around, looking just as tired and worn out as I felt. There was a guy behind the counter, probably in his 20s, with this blank, almost vacant look on his face. He didn't greet me or anything, just stood there, waiting for me to order. I walked up, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling, and ordered my usual. The guy just nodded, punched in the order without saying a word, and went to the back. It was awkwardly quiet. Usually you hear some kind of noise in a McDonald's, the sizzling of the fryers, the chatter of people. But that night, it was like someone hit the mute button. As I waited, I glanced around the place, trying to act casual. That's when I noticed this guy sitting alone in a corner booth. He was just staring at me. I mean, not just a casual glance or anything, but full-on staring, like he was trying to burn a hole through my skull. He looked to be in his 40s, disheveled hair, scruffy beard, wearing a dirty hoodie. His eyes were dark, and there was something about them that made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore him, thinking maybe he was just some weirdo, but every time I looked in his direction, he was still staring, not moving, not blinking, just staring. I felt this urge to just grab my food and get out of there as quickly as possible. Finally, the guy behind the counter came back with my order. He placed the tray on the counter and muttered something I couldn't quite catch. I was too focused on grabbing my food and getting away from that creep in the corner. I took my tray, gave the guy a quick nod, and headed to a table as far away from the staring guy as possible. I sat down, trying to focus on my food, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept my head down, taking a few bites of my burger, but my eyes kept darting back to that guy. He was still staring, his eyes never leaving me. It was like he was studying me, waiting for something. My appetite started to fade, and I just wanted to finish up and leave. Then things got even weirder. I noticed the guy behind the counter watching me too. He was leaning against the counter, his eyes shifting between me and the guy in the corner. There was this unspoken tension in the air, like they were both in on something that I wasn't a part of. I started to feel this cold knot of fear in my stomach. What the hell was going on? I decided I couldn't sit there any longer. I needed to get out of there. I quickly wrapped up my burger, stuffed the fries back into the bag, and got up to leave. As I stood up, the guy in the corner suddenly moved. He got up from his seat, and for a moment, I thought he was going to come towards me. My heart was pounding, but he just stood there, watching me with that same unnerving stare. I walked to the trash can to throw away the remnants of my meal, trying to act casual, like I wasn't freaking out inside. I could feel both of their eyes on me the whole time. I headed for the door, my pace quickening with each step. Just as I reached the exit, I heard the guy behind the counter say something. It was low, almost a whisper, but I heard it clear as day. Be careful out there. I didn't turn around. I didn't ask what he meant. I just pushed the door open and walked out into the night, my heart racing. The parking lot was still almost empty, and I could feel this overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. I just needed to get to my car and get the hell out of there. As I walked to my car, I glanced back towards the entrance. The guy from the corner booth was standing just inside the door, watching me through the glass. He wasn't smiling or frowning, just watching with those cold, dark eyes. It sent shivers down my spine. I fumbled with my keys, unlocked the car, and jumped in, locking the doors behind me. I started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, my hands shaking on the wheel. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that guy following me, but he didn't. The drive home was a blur. I was on edge the whole way, constantly checking my mirrors, paranoid that I was being followed. When I finally got home, I parked the car and sat there for a moment, trying to calm down. My mind was racing with questions. Who was that guy? What was his deal? And why did the employees say that to me? None of it made sense. It felt like I had just narrowly avoided something terrible, but I had no idea what it could have been. For the next few days, I couldn't get the incident out of my head. Every time I thought about it, I got this sinking feeling in my stomach. I started avoiding that McDonald's, taking a different route to work just so I wouldn't have to pass by it. I even told a few friends about it, and we laughed it off, but deep down, it still bothered me. About a week later, I was driving home late again, and I had to pass by that McDonald's. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to stop by during the day, hoping to see if anything seemed off in the daylight. I pulled into the parking lot, which was much busier during the day, and walked inside. There was a different guy behind the counter this time, some older man with a friendly smile. I asked him if the guy who had been working last Friday was around. He gave me a confused look and said, "I'm not sure who you're talking about. I've been working the night shift all week, and I don't remember anyone like that." That sent a chill down my spine. I described the guy to him, but he just shook his head. "Nope, doesn't ring a bell. Maybe he was just filling in for someone." I nodded, but I didn't believe him. The way he looked at me, it was like he knew more than he was letting on. I left without ordering anything, feeling more unsettled than before. I haven't been back to that McDonald's since. I know it sounds paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling that there was something more going on that night. Something that I narrowly escaped without even realizing it. And the way that guy looked at me, like he was studying me, still haunts me. What was he planning? Why did the employee tell me to be careful? Every now and then, when I drive by that McDonald's, I can't help but look over, half expecting to see that guy standing there, watching me with those cold eyes. It's like a shadow that follows me, a reminder of a night that should have been ordinary, but turned into something straight out of a nightmare. And maybe that's the scariest part of all, knowing that sometimes the scariest things can happen in the most ordinary places. You won't believe what happened to me the other night. I was craving some McDonald's. You know how it is. I thought it would be a quick, normal trip. Nothing out of the ordinary. It was just past 10 p.m., so I figured the place would be quiet, perfect for grabbing a late-night snack and heading home. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed it was almost empty, which was strange for a Friday night. Usually there's a line of cars in the drive-thru, but tonight there was just one other car parked at the far end. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe everyone else had the same idea of staying in or something. Walking in, The first thing that hit me was how dead quiet it was. No music playing, no chatter from the kitchen, just this eerie silence. There was a guy at the counter who looked like he hadn't slept in days, with dark circles under his eyes and a blank stare. His name tag read Kevin. He gave me this half-hearted nod when I walked up, like he was just going through the motions. I ordered my usual, Big Mac, large fries, and a Coke. As he punched in my order, I noticed him glancing over his shoulder every few seconds, like he was expecting someone to come out from the back. It was weird. The whole vibe of the place was just off. While I waited for my food, I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. I scanned the dining area, but it was completely empty. Just me and Kevin. There weren't even any workers in the back that I could see, which was odd because usually you can hear the fryer going or something. The only sound was the faint hum of the lights overhead. After what felt like forever, Kevin finally handed me my tray. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with this blank expression as I took it. I mumbled a thanks and found a seat near the window. As I sat down, I noticed that other car in the parking lot again. It was an old, beat-up sedan, and there was someone sitting in the driver's seat, just staring straight ahead. I couldn't see their face clearly, but it was obvious they were watching the building. Trying to shake off the creepiness, I unwrapped my burger and took a bite. It tasted different. Not bad, just not like a regular Big Mac. I took another bite, trying to figure out what was wrong with it, but couldn't put my finger on it. It was like they used some off-brand sauce or something. As I chewed, I glanced up at Kevin. He was still at the counter, just staring at me. It was like he was waiting for something. Then, out of nowhere, I heard this low, rumbling sound. At first, I thought it was just the AC kicking in, but it kept getting louder. It sounded like it was coming from the back of the restaurant. Kevin tensed up, his eyes darting towards the kitchen. He looked back at me, and for a split second, I swear I saw fear in his eyes. I put my burger down and listened. The rumbling sound was growing louder, more intense. It wasn't the AC, it was something else, something heavy and mechanical. I glanced around, expecting to see some kind of kitchen equipment malfunctioning, but everything looked normal. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then they dimmed to this sickly yellow hue. Kevin took a step back, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moved across the doorway leading to the back. It was quick, like a blur, but it was definitely there. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't alone. Kevin was frozen in place, his face pale. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but no words came out. The rumbling sound grew louder, now accompanied by a faint clicking noise, like metal scraping against metal. My skin crawled. Whatever was back there, it was getting closer. I wanted to get up, to run out of there, but my legs wouldn't move. I was glued to my seat, my eyes locked on that doorway. The shadow moved again, this time slower, more deliberate. It was coming towards us. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, and my hands were shaking. Finally, Kevin seemed to snap out of it. He turned to me, his voice barely a whisper. "You need to leave," he said. His eyes were wide, pleading. Now. That was all I needed to hear. I grabbed my tray, ready to bolt, but then the door to the kitchen swung open. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. For a moment, everything was still. Then, slowly, something began to emerge. At first, I thought it was a person, but as it stepped into the dim light, I realized I was wrong. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and its body was covered in this dark, glistening substance. It moved with this unnatural grace, almost like it was gliding across the floor. It had no face, just this smooth, featureless surface where its head should be. Kevin let out a choked gasp and stumbled back, knocking over a stack of trays. The creature turned its head towards him, or at least I think it did. It was hard to tell without any eyes or a mouth. It just stood there for a moment, as if deciding what to do next. Then, in one swift motion, it lunged at him. Kevin let out a scream, but it was cut short as the creature wrapped its long, slender fingers around his throat. I could see his eyes bulging out in terror, his hands clawing at the creature's arm, but it was no use. It lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing. I should have run, should have done something, but I was paralyzed with fear. My mind was screaming at me to move, to do anything, but my body wouldn't listen. I watched in horror as the creature squeezed tighter, and Kevin's struggles grew weaker and weaker until he finally went limp. It dropped him to the floor like a discarded rag doll, and turned its attention to me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I finally managed to break free from my paralysis and stumbled back, knocking over my tray in the process. The creature took a step towards me, and I could see the dark substance dripping from its fingers, pooling on the floor. I turned and ran. I didn't look back, didn't care about making noise. I just ran for the door, my shoes squeaking on the linoleum as I skidded around the corner. I could hear the creature behind me, moving with that same eerie grace, like it was gliding just inches above the ground. I burst through the door and into the parking lot, my lungs burning as I gasped for air. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly that I almost dropped them. Finally, I managed to unlock the car and threw myself inside. I slammed the door shut and jammed the key into the ignition, praying the engine would start. It roared to life, and I floored the gas pedal, peeling out of the parking lot without a second glance. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of the restaurant. The lights were flickering again, and through the window, I saw a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, watching me leave. I didn't stop driving until I was halfway across town, my mind racing with what had just happened. What the hell was that thing? And what was it doing in a McDonald's of all places? I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see it chasing after me, but there was nothing. When I finally got home, I locked all the doors and windows, double-checking each one before collapsing on the couch. I couldn't sleep that night, or the next. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that creature's faceless head, those long, dripping fingers reaching out for me. I tried to tell a couple of friends about it, but they just laughed it off, saying I must have had a bad dream or something. But I know what I saw. It was real, and it was out there. A few days later, I heard that the McDonald's had closed down, some official-sounding excuse about a gas leak or a fire hazard. But I knew the truth. Something was in there, something dangerous. And now, every time I pass by that place, I feel this chill run down my spine. I haven't been back to a McDonald's since. I can't even look at one without getting that sick feeling in my stomach. I don't know what that thing was, but I know I never want to see it again. So, yeah, that's my story. Believe it or not, it happened. And every time I think about it, I can't help but wonder if that thing is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim.